Previously on, she saved a dying wolf. When Karen saved a dying wolf in a storm-soaked forest, she had no idea she'd just healed the most powerful alpha king in existence, or that he'd been searching for her for over a decade. Kale Blackthorn claimed her as his mate, but his love was a lie, a manipulation designed to cage her silver flame power and turn her into an obedient weapon. But Maya discovered his betrayal, shattered his manipulative bond, and when the Devourer of Lights, an ancient entity that feeds on isolation, threatened to consume all of reality, she made an impossible choice: save the world that had rejected her, or watch it burn. 20 wolves. Complete vulnerability. One unified consciousness strong enough to rebuild the seals, but it required an anchor, someone willing to exist in the void forever, holding the prison together from the inside. Kale sacrificed himself to prove he'd finally learned what love really meant. The Devourer was caged. The world was saved. But salvation came with a price no one had anticipated. If you're new here and haven't watched part 1 yet, go back and watch it now. This story will hit differently when you know everything Maya and Kale went through to get to this moment. And if you're returning, welcome back. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't, because what happens next is going to change everything you thought you knew about sacrifice and love. Now, let's see what Maya does when she discovers the terrible truth about Kale's eternal sacrifice. The moment hung suspended between heartbeats, between existence and oblivion, between revenge and redemption. Maya stood at the crossroads of everything, silver flame dancing around her fingers like living starlight, while Kale knelt before her with his head bowed and the weight of kingdoms crumbling in his eyes. Behind them, through the dimensional windows of the between space, reality itself was tearing apart at the seams. Another seal cracked with the sound of worlds ending. The Devourer of Lights stirred in its ancient prison, and Maya felt its attention turn toward the mortal realm like a predator catching the scent of wounded prey. It was hunger given form, emptiness made manifest, the thing that had existed before creation and wanted nothing more than to drag everything back into the void where it was born. And she was the only thing standing between it and total annihilation. Let them burn, the wounded part of her whispered. Let them reap what they've sowed. 3 years of exile, a lifetime of rejection, and now they come crawling back only when they need you. Where were they when you needed them? The thought tasted like ash and old pain, like every moment she'd spent alone and afraid, believing herself cursed and dangerous and unworthy of love. But then Maya looked through the dimensional windows at the world she'd left behind, and she didn't see the councils that had condemned her or the packs that had hunted her. She saw children playing in courtyards who would never grow up if the Devourer broke free. She saw young healers learning their craft, old wolves telling stories by firelight, mates finding each other under moonlight. She saw life, messy, complicated, beautiful life, that deserved a chance to continue even if the people living it had made terrible mistakes. Get up, Maya said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Kale's head snapped up, hope and fear warring in his golden eyes. I said, get up, Maya repeated, her tone hard as diamond. I'm not interested in your groveling Alpha King. I'm not interested in your apologies or your regrets, or your pretty words about how sorry you are. Kale rose slowly to his feet, and Maya saw him brace himself for rejection, for her to turn her back on him and everything he represented. Instead, she stepped forward and placed her hand flat against his chest, right over his heart. You tried to cage me, she said, silver flame flickering between them. You tried to steal my autonomy, turn me into nothing more than an obedient weapon. You planned to burn away everything that made me until only power remained. I know. Kale's voice was raw. Maya, I'm not finished. The flame around her hand pulsed brighter. You were a coward who chose control over trust, manipulation over love. You saw something precious, and your first instinct was to own it, to possess it, to break it down into something manageable. Each word hit Kale like a physical blow, and Maya watched something die in his eyes, the last shred of hope that she might forgive him, might see past his betrayal to the man he claimed he wanted to be. Good. Let him feel even a fraction of the pain he'd caused her. But Maya continued, and the single word made Kale's breath catch. I'm not making this choice for you. I'm making it for every innocent person who will die, if I let my wounded pride matter more than their lives. She pulled her hand back, and the silver flame between them exploded outward, forming intricate patterns in the air, symbols of binding, of oath, of unbreakable covenant. So here's how this works, Maya said, her voice carrying harmonics that made reality itself listen. I'm going to save your world. I'm going to stand between the devourer and everything you love. I'm going to be the guardian the prophecy says I am. Relief flooded Kale's features, but Maya wasn't done. But not as your weapon. Not as your tool. Not as your mate. She spoke the last word like a curse, and watched Kale flinch. I'm doing this as Maya Karen, free, unbound, and answering to no one but myself. The silver symbols hanging in the air began to glow brighter, and Maya felt ancient magic responding to her will. The mate bond you tried to forge through manipulation, consider it severed. She made a sharp gesture, and Kale gasped as phantom chains around his consciousness shattered. Whatever psychic influence you wormed into my mind, gone. Kale staggered as the connections he'd been building snapped like overstretched threads. Without the artificial bond feeding him her power, he suddenly looked diminished, more human, more vulnerable. You want to stand beside me when the devourer comes? Maya asked. You want to prove you're more than the manipulative bastard who tried to enslave me? Fine. But you do it on my terms. You follow my lead. You trust my judgment. And if you ever try to control me again, I will walk away and let reality burn just to watch you lose everything. The threat hung between them, absolute and uncompromising. Do you understand me? Maya demanded. Yes. Kale's voice was barely a whisper. Maya, I swear. Don't. Maya held up a hand. Don't swear anything. Don't make promises you might not keep. Just show me through your actions, whether you're actually capable of change, or if you're just another wolf who sees me as a prize to be won instead of a person to be respected. Through the dimensional windows, the mortal realm shuddered, as shadow walkers poured through widening cracks in reality. Cities burned, packs scattered. The end was coming faster than anyone had predicted. Maya closed her eyes and felt the silver flame inside her expand, felt it reaching toward the heart of the devourer's prison, mapping the battlefield where the final confrontation would take place. The last seal will break in less than 6 hours, she said, opening her eyes. When it does, the devourer will be free to consume everything. Every world, every dimension, every possibility that ever was or could be. How do we stop it? Kale asked. Maya smiled, and there was nothing warm or comforting in the expression. We don't stop it. We can't. The devourer is entropy made conscious, the end of all things given form and hunger. You can't kill what was never truly alive. Then what? We contain it, Maya interrupted. We rebuild the seals. We cage it again the way the first ones did millennia ago. She turned to face him fully. But the original seals were built with the sacrifice of 7 silver flame healers, 13 dire wolves, all of whom gave their lives to create a prison strong enough to hold the void. The implication hung in the air like a death sentence. You're saying we have to die, Kale said flatly. I'm saying someone has to die, Maya corrected, or find another way to generate enough power to rebuild seals that took 20 lives to create the first time. She began walking toward the edge of the between space, where reality grew thin enough to cross back into the mortal realm. So here's what's gonna happen. We're going back. We're gathering every wolf who's willing to fight, and we're going to find a way to cage the end of the world without me having to sacrifice myself for people who tried to destroy me. She paused at the threshold, and looked back at Kale. And if we can't find another way? If it comes down to my life? Or the world? Maya's smile turned sharp as broken glass. Well, I guess we'll see how much they really deserve to be saved. With that, she stepped through the barrier and back into reality, leaving Kale to follow in her wake and wonder whether the woman he'd betrayed was going to be their salvation or their judge. In the darkness beyond the crumbling seals, the devourer laughed, a sound like stars dying and hope turning to ash, and began counting down the final hours until it would be free to feast. Chapter 2. Unlikely Alliance. Maya stepped back into reality and immediately knew something was wrong. The air tasted like copper and smoke. The sky above Kale's territory burned an unnatural shade of crimson, shot through with streaks of black that moved against the wind, and everywhere, absolutely everywhere, the screams of the dying echoed through the morning light. Gods. Kale breathed beside her, his face going pale as he took in the devastation. His castle, the magnificent stronghold that had stood for centuries, was half consumed by shadow. The eastern wall had simply ceased to exist, as if something had taken a bite out of reality itself. Wolves scattered across the courtyard below, some fighting shadow walkers, others fleeing toward the forest in blind panic. And standing in the center of the chaos, surrounded by his warriors, and facing down a horde of shadow creatures, with nothing but silver-blessed weapons, in desperate courage, was the last person Maya expected to see. Alpha Silvermoon. "We need to move," Maya said, already channeling silver flame into her hands. She didn't wait for Kale's response. She simply launched herself off the mountainside they'd materialized on, silver flame forming wings that carried her down toward the battlefield like a falling star. The first shadow walker never saw her coming. Maya's flame consumed it mid-lunge, reducing it to nothing but dissipating darkness and a sound like screaming wind. The second and third fell just as quickly, her power flowing through her, with a control she'd never had before. Breaking Kale's manipulative bond hadn't just freed her mind, it had unleashed something she'd been unconsciously holding back. Now, without his psychic influence muddying her connection to the silver flame, she felt unstoppable. "The silver flame!" someone shouted from the Silvermoon ranks. "She's here!" Maya landed in the courtyard with enough force to crack the stone beneath her feet, silver flame radiating from her body in waves that made the shadow walkers recoil. Around her, both Kale's wolves and Silvermoon's warriors stopped fighting to stare at the woman who looked less human and more like a goddess of war descended from ancient myths. "Everyone behind me," Maya commanded, her voice carrying across the battlefield with supernatural clarity. Now, to her surprise, they obeyed. Warriors who had been enemies moments ago scrambled to get behind the barrier of silver flame she was projecting, forming a protective circle that the shadow walkers couldn't penetrate. Kale landed beside her a moment later, his direwolf form massive and imposing, but even he looked diminished next to the raw power Maya was wielding. "Maya Karen," Alpha Silvermoon's voice cut through the chaos, and Maya turned to face the man who'd exiled her 3 years ago. He looked older than she remembered, gray streaking through his hair, new lines carved around his eyes by grief and war. "You dare show your face here, after everything?" "Shut up," Maya said flatly, and the Alpha's mouth snapped closed in shock. "I don't have time for your righteous indignation. The last seal breaks in less than 6 hours, and when it does, the Devourer of Lights will consume every world that has ever existed, including this one." "The Devourer is a myth," one of Silvermoon's advisors protested. "A story to frighten children." Maya flicked her wrist, and a dimensional window opened above them, showing the space between worlds where she'd just been standing. Through it, they could all see the writhing darkness, the vast hunger that pressed against reality's weakening barriers. "Does that look like a myth to you?" she asked. The courtyard fell silent, except for the sounds of shadow walkers throwing themselves against her barrier. "What do you want from us?" Alpha Silvermoon asked finally, his voice heavy with the realization that everything he'd believed about the world was wrong. "I want every wolf who can fight," Maya replied. "Every warrior, every alpha, every wolf with enough courage to stand against the end of everything. I want them gathered here within the hour." "That's impossible." Counselor Thorn, who Maya now recognized from Kale's conversation in the cave, stepped forward. "Half the packs are in active rebellion. They blame you for the Shadow Walkers, blame the prophecy." "I don't care what they blame," Maya interrupted. Tell them they can hate me, fear me, curse my name for all eternity, but they need to be here if they want to survive past sunset. She let the dimensional window close and turned her attention back to the shadow walkers. With a gesture, she sent a wave of silver flame through them that cleared half the courtyard in seconds. You're stronger, Kale observed quietly, since you broke the bond. I'm unfiltered, Maya corrected. You were siphoning my power without even realizing it, using our connection to feed your own strength. Now there's nothing between me and the source. She could see him flinch at the reminder of his betrayal, but she didn't soften the blow. He needed to understand exactly what he'd been doing to her, even if he hadn't fully grasped the extent of it himself. Maya, Alpha Silvermoon's voice had lost its authoritative edge, replaced by something that sounded almost like desperation. If what you're saying is true, if the devourer is real, how do we stop it? Maya turned to face him, this man who'd condemned her, who'd called her cursed and dangerous, who'd sent her into 3 years of exile and loneliness. She saw the weight of leadership in his eyes, the burden of knowing that every decision he made determined whether his people lived or died. She knew that weight. She carried it now too. We rebuild the seals, Maya said, the way the first ones did millennia ago, but the original seals required the sacrifice of 7 silver flame healers and 13 dire wolves, all of whom gave their lives to create a prison strong enough to hold the void. You're saying we need to die, Alpha Silvermoon said, echoing Kale's words from the between space. I'm saying we need to find another way, Maya replied, because I didn't survive 3 years of hell just to throw my life away for people who wanted me dead. But to find that other way, I need information, ancient texts, old records, anything the first ones might have left behind about alternative methods. The archives of the moon. Elder Marcus, the same advisor who'd spoken her banishment, stepped forward with trembling hands. In the deepest vault of the Silver Moon territory, records that date back to the founding of our kind. Can we reach them before the seal breaks? Maya asked. If we leave now, and don't stop for anything, the elder replied. But Maya, those archives are forbidden, protected by magic that kills anyone with darkness in their heart who tries to access them. Maya almost laughed. Good thing my heart is full of righteous fury, instead of darkness. Then, she turned to address the gathered wolves, both Kale's and Silvermoon's, enemies forced into alliance by the end of the world. Here's what's going to happen, Maya announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the courtyard. We split into 3 groups. Group 1 stays here and holds this position against the Shadow Walkers. Group 2 spreads out to every pack in the northern territories and tells them to send their strongest fighters here. Group 3 comes with me to the Silver Moon archives. And who exactly put you in charge? One of Silver Moon's warriors challenged. Maya let silver flame dance across her fingertips and smiled without warmth. The universe did when it made me the only silver flame healer left alive. Anyone who has a problem with that is welcome to face the devourer without me. No one spoke up. That's what I thought. Maya looked at Kale, who was still in his direwolf form. You're with the defense group. Hold this castle. Don't let anything through. She could see him wanting to protest, wanting to stay by her side, but he simply nodded. Proving himself meant following her lead, even when it killed him to let her walk into danger without him. Alpha Silvermoon, Maya continued. You're coming with me. Elder Marcus too. Anyone else who knows the way to these archives. The Alpha looked like he wanted to argue but thought better of it. My daughter knows the path better than anyone. She's been studying the old ways. Then bring her. Maya turned toward the castle gates. We leave in 5 minutes. Anyone not ready gets left behind. As the wolves scrambled to organize themselves, Kale shifted back to human form and caught Maya's arm gently. Be careful, he said quietly. The archives aren't just protected by magic. There are things down there. Old things. Maya met his golden eyes and saw genuine concern mixed with guilt and desperate hope. I've faced worse than old things in dark places, Kale. I've faced you. The words hit their mark, and she saw him flinch before she pulled away and headed toward the gates. Behind them, another seal cracked with the sound of reality breaking, and somewhere in the darkness, the devourer stirred with growing hunger. 5.5 hours until the end of everything. Maya intended to make every second count. Chapter 3. The Devourer Rises. The journey to the Silver Moon archives took them through territory Maya had sworn she'd never see again. Every tree, every stone, every curve in the forest path carried memories that cut like knives. Running through these woods as a child, learning to hunt with wolves who'd later turn their backs on her, falling in love with Marcus, under moonlight filtered through these same ancient branches. "It's changed," Alpha Silvermoon said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. He walked beside her while his daughter, a young woman named Sarah, with her father's gray eyes and her mother's dark hair, led the way through increasingly dense forest. "After Marcus died, after you left, the territory mourned." "Don't," Maya said flatly. "Don't try to make me feel sympathy for people who chose exile over understanding." "I'm not asking for sympathy," the Alpha replied. "I'm stating fact. We made a choice born of fear and ignorance. We've been paying for it ever since." Maya didn't respond. She couldn't afford to let old wounds distract her from the mission. 4 hours and 43 minutes until the final seal broke. Every second mattered. Sarah stopped abruptly ahead of them, holding up a hand for silence. "We're here," she whispered, "but something's wrong." Maya pushed forward and felt her blood run cold. The entrance to the archives should have been hidden behind powerful illusions, protected by magic that had stood for thousands of years. Instead, the concealment spells had been shattered, leaving a gaping wound in the earth that descended into absolute darkness. And from that darkness came whispers that made Maya's skin crawl, voices speaking in the language of entropy, of endings, of the void that existed before creation. Shadow walkers found it first. Elder Marcus breathed in horror. "The Devourer's servants have breached the archives." Maya stepped to the edge of the opening and looked down into darkness that seemed to move, to breathe, to hunger. Silver flame flickered around her hands in response to the supernatural wrongness emanating from below. "How far down do the archives go?" she asked. 7 levels, Sierra replied, her voice shaking slightly. "The deepest chamber holds the first records, the original texts written by the Silver Flame Healers who first sealed the Devourer. And between here and there, protection spells, guardian constructs, and enough magical traps to kill anyone who doesn't have pure intentions." Maya smiled grimly. "Then I guess it's a good thing I'm doing this to save the world and not for personal glory." She started down the stone steps that descended into darkness, silver flame growing brighter around her body to light the way. Behind her, she heard Alpha Silvermoon, Sarah, and Elder Marcus following, though their footsteps were hesitant, fearful. The first level of the archives was in ruins. Ancient shelves that should have held texts dating back millennia lay smashed on the floor, their contents scattered like fallen leaves. But it wasn't just physical destruction. Maya could feel the wrongness in the air, like reality itself had been wounded here. Shadow walkers had definitely been through this place, but they were gone now, deeper, hunting for something specific. "They're looking for the sealing ritual," Maya realized aloud. "They want to make sure we can't rebuild the prison." "Can they destroy knowledge?" Elder Marcus asked. "The texts are protected by—" His words cut off as something moved in the shadows ahead. It wasn't a shadow walker. Those creatures were mindless hunger given form, dangerous but predictable. This was something else entirely, something that radiated intelligence and malice in equal measure. A figure stepped into the light of Maya's silver flame, and she felt her heart stutter in recognition. "Hello, Maya," Marcus said, wearing her dead lover's face like a stolen coat. "I've been waiting for you." But it wasn't Marcus. Couldn't be Marcus. She'd seen his spirit in the between space, peaceful and at rest. This thing wearing his features had eyes that burned with emptiness, with the infinite hunger of the void. "The Devourer," Maya breathed. "A fragment of it," the Marcus thing corrected, its voice layered with harmonics that hurt to hear. a piece of consciousness sent ahead to prepare the way, and to greet the silver flame healer, who thinks she can cage eternity. Alpha Silvermoon moved to attack, but Maya threw out a hand to stop him. Don't. Physical weapons won't work on it. This isn't a body. It's a puppet made of stolen memories and shadow. The devourer laughed with Marcus's voice, and the sound made tears spring to Maya's eyes despite herself. Oh, Maya. It crooned, still carrying guilt for this one's death? Still believing you destroyed him with your cursed gift? Shut up, Maya snarled, silver flame building around her fists. But it's so delicious, the devourer continued, circling them like a shark in dark water. All that self-hatred, all that pain. You've been feeding me for 3 years without even knowing it. Every moment you believed yourself cursed, every tear you shed, every time you pushed away the possibility of connection, you were weakening the seals that kept me imprisoned. Maya felt the truth of its words like acid in her veins. Her suffering, her isolation, her belief that she was fundamentally broken. It had all been fuel for the very thing that now threatened to consume everything. The seals weren't just built with sacrifice, the devourer explained, clearly enjoying itself. They were maintained by hope, by connection, by the belief that life was worth protecting. But you've spent 3 years believing you were better off alone, that everyone you touched turned to ash. It smiled with Marcus's face. You've been my greatest ally, little flame. No, Maya whispered. But even as she spoke, she felt the horrible weight of realization. Every rejection she'd accepted, every time she'd run instead of fighting for connection, every wall she'd built around her heart, they'd all been tiny fractures in reality's armor. And the best part? The devourer leaned closer. The man you're starting to care about, the Alpha King who tried to cage you, he's doing the same thing, pushing away connection, choosing control over vulnerability, feeding the very entropy he claims to fight. Its smile widened. You're both so beautifully broken, so perfectly isolated, so deliciously alone. We're not alone. Sierra spoke up suddenly, stepping forward despite her obvious terror. She has us. She has people willing to follow her, to fight beside her, to stand between her and the dark. The devourer's attention snapped to Sarah, and Maya saw the young woman flinch under that terrible gaze. Ah yes, it said, the daughter of the man who condemned her. Tell me, child, if Maya asked you to sacrifice yourself to rebuild the seals, would you? Would you give your life for the exile your father cast out? Sarah's jaw tightened. Yes. And you believe that would be enough? One brave sacrifice? The devourer laughed. The original seals took 20 lives, 20 wolves willing to die for connection, for community, for love. But your people? It gestured dismissively. They can barely work together when survival is guaranteed. What makes you think they'll lay down their lives for a woman they fear? Because she already chose to save us, Alpha Silvermoon said, his voice carrying the weight of leadership and regret. She could have let us burn, could have watched from the between space as we reaped what we'd sown, but she came back. She chose mercy over vengeance. For now, the devourer replied. But wait until the moment comes. Wait until she has to choose between her own life and a world that rejected her. Then we'll see what the silver flame really chooses. Maya had heard enough. She raised both hands and sent a surge of pure silver flame directly at the Marcus thing. The fire consumed it instantly, reducing the puppet to ash and scattered shadows, but even as it dissolved, the devourer's laughter echoed through the archives. I'll be seeing you soon, little flame. When the final seal breaks and we meet face to face, you'll understand that you've already lost, because to cage me again, you'll have to embrace everything you've been running from: connection, vulnerability, the risk of being hurt again. Its voice faded to nothing, leaving only silence and the lingering chill of entropy. Maya stood there, breathing hard, her silver flame flickering with emotion she couldn't quite name. It was lying, Elder Marcus said firmly, trying to break your resolve. It was telling the truth, Maya interrupted. At least about some things. The seals are maintained by connection, by hope, by the belief that life is worth protecting, and I've spent 3 years believing the opposite. She looked at Alpha Silvermoon. We need those records. Now. Before it sends something worse. They moved deeper into the archives, descending through levels of increasing protection and ancient power. At each level, they found evidence of Shadow Walker passage, destroyed texts, shattered spells, reality itself fraying at the edges. Finally, they reached the 7th level. The chamber was massive, its walls covered in silver script that seemed to write and rewrite itself constantly. At the center stood a crystal pedestal, and on it rested a single book bound in what looked like starlight and shadow woven together. The first record, Syrah breathed in awe. Maya approached the pedestal carefully, half expecting some final trap or guardian, but nothing stopped her as she reached out and lifted the ancient book. The moment her fingers touched the cover, knowledge exploded through her mind like a supernova. Chapter 4. Breaking Bonds. The knowledge hit Maya like a tidal wave, thousands of years of history and magic flooding through her consciousness in the span of a heartbeat. She saw the first ones as they had been, 7 silver flame healers standing in a circle, their combined power blazing bright enough to rival the sun. She saw 13 dire wolves forming an outer ring, their ancient strength creating a framework for the healing magic to anchor itself. And she saw the devourer as it truly was, not a creature or a being, but absence itself, the hungry nothing that existed before the first light sparked in the darkness. The original sealing hadn't been a sacrifice of lives. Maya realized with stunning clarity, it had been a sacrifice of isolation. Each of the 20 wolves who'd created the prison had given up something more precious than their lives. They'd surrendered their walls, their defenses, their carefully constructed barriers against pain. They'd opened themselves completely to each other, creating a web of connection so powerful that even the void couldn't tear through it. 20 souls, perfectly vulnerable, perfectly trusting, perfectly bound together by love and purpose. And they'd survived. All of them. The truth of it made Maya want to laugh and scream at the same time. The devourer had lied through Marcus's stolen face. The sealing didn't require death. It required something infinitely harder. It required 20 wolves to stand together without fear, without doubt, without the protective isolation that had kept Maya alive for 3 years. She gasped and pulled back from the book, her knees buckling. Syrah caught her before she could fall, supporting her weight with surprising strength. Maya, what did you see? Alpha Silvermoon demanded. Everything, Maya whispered. I saw everything. And I know how to rebuild the seals. She looked up at them with eyes that burned with silver flame. But you're not going to like it. She stood on shaking legs and turned to face them fully. The original sealing wasn't a blood sacrifice, Maya explained. It was a sacrifice of isolation. The first ones created a bond between themselves so complete, so absolute, that it formed a web the devourer couldn't penetrate, pure connection given form and power. So no one has to die? Elder Marcus asked, hopefully. We all have to die, Maya corrected. In a sense, every wall we've built, every defense mechanism, every bit of protective isolation, it all has to go. We have to open ourselves completely to each other. No secrets, no barriers, no fear of being hurt. 20 wolves becoming one unified consciousness, for the span of time it takes to rebuild the prison. The silence that followed was deafening. That's, Syrah started, then stopped, clearly struggling to find words. That's asking for complete vulnerability, total trust. Which is why the devourer has spent millennia feeding off isolation and fear, Maya said. Because as long as we're afraid to connect, afraid to be vulnerable, the seals will continue to weaken. Our fear is its food. Alpha Silvermoon's face had gone ashen. You're saying we need to gather 20 wolves willing to tear down every wall they've ever built, to expose their deepest wounds, their darkest secrets, their most carefully guarded pain. I'm saying we need 20 wolves brave enough to choose connection over safety, Maya replied. And we need them in. She glanced at the knowledge still resonating in her mind. 3 hours and 17 minutes. That's when the final seal breaks. It's impossible, Elder Marcus said flatly. Most wolves spend their entire lives building those walls. You can't just ask them to drop everything in a matter of hours. Then we're all going to die, Maya said simply, because that's the choice. Total vulnerability or total annihilation. There is no middle ground. She walked to the center of the chamber, her mind already working through the logistics. 7 silver flame healers and 13 dire wolves. The problem was, there was only 1 silver flame healer left in existence. The ratio doesn't have to be exact, she said, speaking more to herself than to the others. The first record shows variations in different realities. What matters is balance, healing energy and primal strength, woven together through perfect trust. Even if we could find 19 other wolves willing to do this, Sarah said carefully, how do we know it will work? How do we know we won't just lose ourselves in the connection? Maya looked at her. This young woman, who'd shown more courage in the past hour than most wolves displayed in a lifetime. We don't, Maya admitted. The first ones emerged from the ceiling changed, bound to each other for the rest of their lives. They could feel each other's emotions, share each other's pain, never truly be alone again. She paused. Some of them called it a blessing, others called it a curse. And you're willing to risk that? Alpha Silvermoon asked. To be forever bound to 19 other souls, including people who've hurt you, rejected you, tried to destroy you? Maya thought about the past 3 years, thought about the crushing loneliness, the constant fear, the belief that she was fundamentally broken and dangerous, thought about walls she'd built so high and thick that she could barely remember what connection felt like. Then she thought about the world, messy, complicated, beautiful, and worth saving despite its flaws. Yes, she said simply. I'm willing. The question is whether anyone else is. She turned and headed for the stairs leading back up to the surface. We need to return to Kale's territory, gather whoever's willing, and Alpha Silvermoon. She looked back over her shoulder. You need to decide right now whether you're one of the 20. Because if you can't let go of your guilt about Marcus, if you can't drop the walls that make you Alphas instead of just a man, then you're no use to me. The challenge hung in the air between them. Alpha Silvermoon stared at her for a long moment, and Maya saw decades of leadership, of making impossible choices, of carrying burdens no one else could see. Then he nodded. I'm in. Whatever it takes. Good. Maya started climbing. Elder Marcus? Sarah. You're asking me to open my mind to the woman my father exiled, Sarah said. But there was no accusation in her voice, only curiosity. I'm asking you to help save the world, Maya replied. Everything else is secondary. Sarah smiled. Then yes, I'm in. Elder Marcus took longer to answer. Maya could see him wrestling with centuries of tradition, of protocols and proper procedures. Finally, he sighed. The elders are supposed to maintain distance, he said, supposed to stay objective, removed from emotion. But I suspect that's exactly the kind of isolation the devourer feeds on. He straightened his shoulders. Count me in. 3 down. 17 to go. They emerged from the archives to find the world had gotten worse in the hour they'd been underground. The sky had turned completely black, shot through with veins of red that pulsed like a dying heartbeat. The air tasted of ash and endings. How long? Sarah whispered. 3 hours, Maya replied. Maybe less. The seals are failing faster than predicted. They ran through the forest, racing against time itself. When they finally burst back onto the grounds of Kale's castle, Maya's heart sank. The courtyard was a war zone. Shadow walkers poured through multiple breaches now, and the wolves defending the position were barely holding the line. She could see Kale in his dire wolf form at the center of the fighting, his massive jaws tearing through shadow creatures with brutal efficiency. But they were losing. Slowly, inevitably, they were being pushed back. Maya didn't hesitate. She raised both hands and released a wave of silver flame that swept across the courtyard like a cleansing fire. Shadow walkers disintegrated by the dozens, giving the defending wolves precious moments to catch their breath. Kale's head snapped toward her, and even in wolf form, She could read the relief in his golden eyes. "Listen up," Maya's voice carried across the battlefield, amplified by silver flame. "I know how to stop the devourer. I know how to rebuild the seals." Every wolf in the courtyard turned to stare at her. "But it requires something harder than sacrifice," Maya continued. "It requires 20 wolves willing to drop every wall, every defense, every bit of isolation that keeps us safe. 20 wolves willing to become completely vulnerable to each other, to share everything, pain, fear, shame, love, hope, without holding anything back." She could see the fear in their eyes, the instinctive recoil from the idea of such total exposure. "I need 19 wolves, brave enough to choose connection over safety," Maya said. "Brave enough to risk being hurt if it means saving everything. Who's willing to stand with me?" The silence stretched out, broken only by the distant howls of shadow walkers and the sound of reality itself beginning to tear. Then Sarah stepped forward. "I am." Alpha Silvermoon followed. "I am." Elder Marcus joined them. "I am." Kale shifted back to human form, his eyes locked on Maya's face. "I am," he said quietly. "Whatever it takes, whatever it costs." Maya felt something crack in her chest, not breaking, but opening, like the first rays of light breaking through storm clouds. "That's 4, she said. "We need 16 more." And slowly, one by one, wolves began stepping forward. Some she recognized from Kale's pack, others from Silvermoon's territory, a few from smaller packs who'd been drawn by the call to defend against the Shadow Walkers. Each one saying the same words, "I am." By the time the volunteers stopped coming forward, Maya counted exactly 20 wolves standing in the courtyard, ready to tear down their walls and face the void together. 20 souls willing to choose vulnerability over safety. 20 wolves ready to become something more than isolated individuals. Maya looked at them. Former enemies, strangers, people who'd hurt her, and people she'd hurt, and felt the first stirrings of something she'd thought was dead forever. Hope. Chapter 5. Alpha Silvermoon's Reckoning. Maya led the 20 volunteers to the sacred grove, where this had all begun, where she'd first healed Kale, where the prophecy had awakened, where Alpha Silvermoon's warriors had tried to execute her just days ago. The altar still stood at the center, its silver symbols pulsing with ancient power, but the grove itself had changed. The trees were dying, their leaves falling like ash. The ground beneath their feet felt unstable, as if reality itself was losing cohesion. 2 hours and 43 minutes until the final seal broke. "Form a circle," Maya instructed, her voice steady, despite the terror coiling in her gut. 7 of you on the inner ring, 13 on the outer. It doesn't matter who goes where. What matters is that you're willing to open completely. The wolves moved into position, and Maya felt the weight of their fear like a physical presence. They knew what was coming, knew that in moments, every secret they'd ever kept, every wound they'd ever hidden, every shameful thought they'd ever had would be laid bare for 19 other souls to witness. It was the ultimate nightmare for creatures who survived by maintaining carefully crafted personas. "Before we begin," Maya said, standing at the center of the circle, "I need you to understand what's about to happen. When I activate the bonding ritual, your minds will merge. Not gently, not gradually, but all at once. You'll feel everything everyone else is feeling. Know everything everyone else knows. There will be nowhere to hide. Nothing you can hold back." She looked around the circle, meeting each wolf's eyes in turn. "Some of you will see things that hurt you. Some of you will have to confront truths you've been running from your entire lives. And all of you will emerge from this changed, bound to these 19 other souls for as long as you live." She paused. "If anyone wants to leave, now is the time. No judgment, no shame. But once we begin, there's no going back." No one moved. "All right then." Maya raised her hands, and silver flame began to spiral around her body. "Let's tear down some walls." The ritual began with a whisper of power that quickly built to a roar. Silver flame poured from Maya's hands into the altar, which blazed to life with ancient magic. The symbols carved into stone flared bright enough to hurt, and tendrils of silver light shot out to connect each wolf in the circle. The moment the connections completed, Maya felt 19 other consciousnesses slam into her own like a tsunami. Pain, terror, guilt, shame, hope, love, fear, rage, grief. The emotions hit from all directions, overwhelming in their intensity. Maya gasped and nearly lost her grip on the ritual, but she forced herself to stay focused, to hold the space while the others learned to navigate the sudden absence of walls. Through the connection, she felt Kale's mind brush against hers, and immediately recoiled from the raw wound she found there. His guilt over betraying her wasn't just surface-level regret. It was a gaping chasm of self-loathing that went deeper than she'd imagined, connected to older wounds about his father, about leadership, about being the dire wolf who had to always be in control or risk becoming a monster. "I'm sorry," his thoughts whispered across the bond. "I'm so sorry, Maya. I was terrified of losing control, of being vulnerable, so I tried to control you instead. I thought if I could possess your power, I'd never have to face my own fear of becoming like him." The memory surfaced unbidden. Kale as a child, watching his father, the previous direwolf king, lose control during a challenge, and tear apart 3 wolves in a blind rage. The terror on the young prince's face, the vow he'd made that day to never ever lose control, no matter what it cost him. Maya felt tears streaming down her face as she understood. Kale hadn't tried to cage her because he was cruel. He'd done it because he was terrified of the chaos that lived inside himself. Controlling her had been a desperate attempt to prove he could control anything, even the wildest power in existence. It didn't excuse what he'd done, but it explained it. "I see you," Maya sent back through the bond. "I see all of it, Kale. The fear, and the guilt, and the desperate need to prove you're not your father. And I'm still angry. I'm still hurt. But I understand." She felt his relief like a physical wave, but there was no time to process it further, because another consciousness was pushing forward. Alpha Silvermoon, and the memories he carried were like knives made of shame. The night Marcus died played out in perfect clarity across the bond, but this time Maya saw it from the Alpha's perspective. He'd found his son in that clearing, surrounded by 16 dead wolves, covered in blood and silver-eyed with madness. But what Maya hadn't known, what no one had told her, was that Marcus had still been partially conscious in those final moments, still aware enough to recognize his father. "Kill me," Marcus had begged, his voice raw with horror at what he'd become. "Please, father. I can't stop it. I can't control it. I don't want to hurt anyone else." Alpha Silvermoon had hesitated, weapon raised, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry," Marcus had whispered. "Tell Maya this wasn't her fault. Tell her I loved her. Tell her the monster was always in me, waiting. She just gave it form." Those had been his last words before the direwolf madness consumed him completely, forcing his father to pull the trigger. Maya felt the grief hit her like a physical blow. All these years, she'd believed Marcus had been mindless, that he'd died as a beast, with no awareness of what he'd done. But he'd known. He'd been awake and aware and horrified, trapped inside a body that wouldn't obey him anymore. "I never told you, Alpha." Silvermoon's thoughts were heavy with guilt. "I thought it would be kinder to let you believe he'd died quickly, that he wasn't suffering. But the truth is, I couldn't face telling you that my son's last words were asking me to forgive you for something that was never your fault in the first place." The Alpha's walls crumbled completely, and Maya saw everything. How he'd blamed her because blaming himself was too painful. How he'd exiled her to protect his remaining pack members, but also to protect himself from having to face his own failure as a father. How he'd spent 3 years knowing he'd made the wrong choice, but being too proud to admit it. "He wanted me to tell you it wasn't your fault," Alpha Silvermoon repeated, his mental voice breaking. "And instead, I made you carry that guilt for 3 years. I'm sorry, Maya. I'm so deeply sorry." Maya wanted to rage at him, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain his silence had caused. But through the bond, she could feel the genuine torment in his soul, the way he'd punished himself every single day since that night. "I forgive you," she sent, and felt his shock ripple through the connection. "Not because you deserve it, but because I'm tired of carrying this weight, and forgiveness is the only way to put it down." Other wolves in the circle were having their own reckonings. Sierra was confronting her mother's death during childbirth, guilt she'd carried since childhood despite having no control over it. Elder Marcus was facing centuries of choices made from fear rather than wisdom. Kale's warriors were exposing prejudices and failures they'd hidden behind duty and loyalty. And through it all, the bond between the 20 wolves grew stronger, deeper, more unbreakable. Maya felt it happening, the transformation the first ones had undergone. Individual consciousness merging into something larger, while still maintaining the core of who they were. 20 separate threads, weaving together into a tapestry that could hold back the void itself. But there was still one wall that needed to fall. One truth Maya had been holding back, protected behind barriers she'd maintained for so long they felt like part of her identity. Through the bond, she felt Kale recognize what she was doing, and his mental presence wrapped around hers like an embrace. "You don't have to," he sent gently. "You've given enough." "No," Maya interrupted. "If I'm asking 19 other wolves to be completely vulnerable, I can't hold anything back either." She took a mental breath and let the wall crumble. The truth poured out into the bond. Maya had known. Some part of her had sensed the direwolf bloodline in Marcus before she healed him. Her silver flame had recognized the sleeping predator in his DNA and had made a choice: awaken it or let him die from the silver poisoning. She'd chosen to save him anyway, knowing the risk, because she'd loved him and couldn't bear to lose him. The guilt she'd carried wasn't just about the 16 wolves who'd died after Marcus's transformation. It was about the fact that she'd gambled with other people's lives and lost. She'd chosen one person she loved over the safety of dozens she didn't know, and the consequences had been catastrophic. "I knew," Maya confessed to all of them. "Maybe not consciously, maybe not completely, but some part of me knew awakening that bloodline was dangerous. And I did it anyway, because I was selfish and in love, and couldn't imagine a world without him in it." The silence that followed felt like judgment, and Maya braced herself for rejection. Instead, she felt understanding flowing from multiple directions. "You were 20 years old," Sarah sent, "in love for the first time, facing an impossible choice with seconds to decide. You chose love over safety," another voice added, one of Kale's warriors. "That's not weakness. That's the most human thing anyone can do. And you've spent 3 years punishing yourself for it." Kale's presence wrapped tighter around her. 3 years believing you were cursed when really, you were just someone who made a choice in an impossible situation. The acceptance, the lack of judgment, was almost harder to bear than condemnation would have been. Maya felt something inside her that had been frozen for 3 years finally begin to thaw. Through the bond, she felt the exact moment when the 20 individual wolves became something more, when their walls fell completely and their consciousnesses merged into a unified whole that was greater than the sum of its parts. 20 souls, perfectly vulnerable, perfectly trusting, perfectly bound together. And the power it generated was like nothing Maya had ever felt before. Silver flame erupted from the altar, rising into the dying sky like a beacon. The ground beneath them began to stabilize, reality itself responding to the concentrated force of their connection. But in the distance, Maya felt it, the final seal shattering. The devourer was free. Chapter 6. Into the Void. The moment the final seal shattered, reality screamed. Through the bond connecting all 20 souls, Maya felt the devourer's presence explode into existence like antimatter touching matter. The sky above the sacred grove didn't just darken, it ceased to be, replaced by absolute emptiness that was somehow more terrifying than any darkness. And from that emptiness came a voice that was every nightmare ever dreamed, every fear ever felt, every moment of despair ever experienced. Finally, the devourer spoke directly into their merged consciousness. "Finally, I am free to reclaim what was always mine. All that exists, returning to the nothing from which it came." Hold the connection, Maya commanded through the bond, feeling several of the wolves faltering under the weight of that terrible presence. Don't let it separate us. Our unity is the only weapon we have. Through their shared vision, Maya could see the devourer manifesting in the physical world. It wasn't taking a single form. It was everywhere and nowhere, a presence that existed in the spaces between atoms, in the gaps where reality grew thin. Shadow walkers poured from it like blood from a wound, thousands of them spreading across the territories in waves of annihilation. We need to go to it, Maya sent through the bond. We can't build the seals from here. We have to enter the void itself. She felt the terror that rippled through their merged consciousness at those words. The void was death, was ending, was everything they'd spent their entire lives running from. Trust me, Maya sent, and felt 19 souls reaching back toward her with acceptance despite their fear. We go together. We face it together, and we come back together. The silver flame around them intensified, and Maya felt the ancient magic of the grove responding to their unified will. The altar beneath them began to glow, symbols rearranging themselves into a pattern Maya recognized from the first record. A gateway, a path into the space between existence and non-existence, where the devourer made its home. Everyone hold on, Maya said aloud, her voice echoing through both the physical world and their shared consciousness. This is going to hurt. She activated the gateway, and the world dissolved around them. The transition was agony, every nerve ending screaming as their physical bodies were temporarily translated into pure consciousness. For an instant that lasted forever, they ceased to exist in any meaningful sense, becoming nothing but 20 points of light suspended in infinite darkness. Then they reformed on the other side, and Maya's breath caught at what she saw. The void between worlds was beautiful in the most terrible way imaginable. It was the space where reality hadn't yet decided what to become, where all possibilities existed in superposition, swirling galaxies of unborn stars, shadows of worlds that had never quite manifested, echoes of lives that could have been but weren't. And at the center of it all, the devourer waited. It was massive beyond comprehension, a presence that dwarfed galaxies and made infinity seem small. But it was also intimate, personal, knowing. Maya felt it looking at each of them individually, recognizing their fears, their wounds, their secret shames. You brought me a feast. The devourer's voice was almost gentle now. Amused. 20 souls. All their walls torn down. All their pain exposed. Do you have any idea how delicious vulnerability tastes? We didn't come here to be consumed, Maya said, her voice steady despite the terror trying to claw its way up her throat. We came here to rebuild your prison. The devourer laughed, and the sound was the universe ending and beginning again in the same instant. With what? Your precious connection? Your unity? It shifted, and suddenly Maya was looking at herself. A mirror image formed from shadow and hunger. I am connection's opposite, little flame. I am the space between souls where loneliness lives. Every moment you've ever felt alone. Every time you've believed yourself unlovable. That was me feeding on the gaps in your heart. The shadow Maya smiled with her own face. And you brought me 19 more hearts, all full of gaps I can exploit. Through the bond, Maya felt the devourer's attention turn to Kale, and shadow tentacles reached out to wrap around his consciousness. The king who controls because he's terrified of chaos. Let me show you what happens when you finally lose control. No. Maya thrust silver flame between Kale and the devourer's attack, severing the connection before it could complete. You don't get to touch him. You don't get to touch any of them. Protective. How touching. The devourer's attention shifted to Alpha Silver Moon and the father who killed his son. Tell me, Alpha, do you hear Marcus screaming when you sleep? Do you see his face when you close your eyes? Every night, Alpha Silver Moon's voice came through the bond, strong despite the pain Maya felt radiating from him. Every single night. But Maya helped me understand something. Carrying that guilt doesn't honor Marcus's memory. Living, fighting, choosing connection over isolation. That's what he would have wanted. The devourer recoiled slightly, as if the acceptance had burned it. Interesting, it said. Genuine curiosity in its terrible voice. You've learned to metabolize pain into purpose. Impressive, for creatures so fragile. It turned its full attention to Maya, and she felt the weight of infinity pressing down on her consciousness. But you, Silver Flame, you're the real prize. 3 years I've been feeding on your self-hatred, your isolation, your belief that everything you touch turns to ash. And now you think you can cage me? The void around them began to shift, reshaping itself into memory. Maya watched herself at 20 years old, hands glowing with silver flame as she poured everything she had into saving Marcus. Watched the moment she sensed the dire wolf bloodline, and made her choice. Watched the aftermath. The screaming, the blood, the 16 bodies torn apart by a madness she'd unleashed. You did that, the Devourer whispered. You chose one life over 16, you gambled and lost, and innocence paid the price. How do you live with that? How do you look at yourself and see anything but a monster? The words hit every insecurity Maya had ever felt, every moment of self-loathing she'd experienced over the past 3 years. She felt herself starting to fragment, to pull away from the unified consciousness, to retreat behind walls that would protect her from the pain. But then she felt them, 19 other souls reaching for her through the bond. Kale's presence wrapped around her. You're not a monster. You're someone who made an impossible choice, and has been punishing yourself ever since. Syrah's voice. You were brave enough to choose love. That's not a weakness. Alpha Silver Moon. Marcus forgave you before he died. Maybe it's time you forgave yourself. Elder Marcus. The first ones weren't perfect either. They made mistakes, caused pain, lived with regret, but they chose to keep fighting anyway. One by one, the other wolves added their voices, their acceptance, their refusal to let Maya fall into the void of self-hatred the Devourer was trying to drown her in. And Maya realized something that made her want to laugh and cry at the same time. The Devourer was afraid. It was ancient and powerful and infinite, but it was also terrified of the one thing it could never consume: genuine connection, vulnerability transformed into strength, wounds that became wisdom instead of weapons. You're right, Maya said, her voice growing stronger. I made a choice that cost 16 lives. I'll carry that weight forever. But I'm not going to let it destroy me anymore, because that would mean those deaths were meaningless. She felt silver flame building around her consciousness, fed by the connection to 19 other souls who refused to let her face this alone. The first ones didn't seal you with perfection, Maya continued. They sealed you with messy, complicated, imperfect connection, with love that included anger and forgiveness, that included pain and hope that coexisted with grief. The flame around her grew brighter, and she felt the other wolves adding their power to hers, not because she was controlling them, but because they were choosing to stand with her. You want to know how we cage infinity? Maya asked. We don't. We just show it something bigger than itself. She reached out through the bond, feeling for the pattern the first ones had used millennia ago. 7 points of healing light, 13 points of primal strength, all woven together by threads of connection that the Devourer couldn't break because they were built on acceptance rather than fear. The seal began to form around the Devourer's presence, not a prison of walls and barriers, but a web of living connection that defined the space where it could and couldn't exist. No, the Devourer's voice rose in what might have been rage, or might have been fear. You can't. This isn't. We already are, Maya said simply. The silver flame exploded outward from their unified consciousness, and for a moment Maya saw reality itself bend around their will. The web of connection solidified, each thread representing a bond between the 20 souls, Kale's strength supporting Maya's healing, Sarah's courage anchoring Alpha Silvermoon's wisdom, Elder Marcus's knowledge, flowing into the warrior's determination. 20 souls becoming one force that was greater than the sum of its parts. The Devourer thrashed against the forming seal, shadow tentacles lashing out in desperation, but every attack just made the web stronger. Because they'd learned something the first ones had known, the void couldn't break connections that were built on complete honesty, on vulnerability that had been tested and proven unbreakable. "This isn't over," the devourer roared as the final threads of the seal locked into place. "Entropy is patient. Isolation always returns. One day you'll forget this unity. You'll retreat behind your walls again, and when you do, I'll be waiting. Then we'll remember," Maya said. "Together." The seal completed with a sound like the universe taking a breath, and the void shuddered as the devourer was forced back into its prison of connection and light. Chapter 7. Kale's Sacrifice. The seal was holding, but Maya could feel it straining. Through the bond connecting all 20 souls, she sensed what the others couldn't yet. The web of connection they'd built was incomplete, strong enough to cage the devourer temporarily, but not permanent enough to last millennia like the first one's seal had. Something was missing, some final piece that would transform their temporary prison into an eternal one. The anchor, the knowledge from the first record whispered through her consciousness. Every seal needs an anchor, one soul willing to remain in the void permanently, holding the web together from the inside. Maya's blood ran cold as understanding crashed over her. The first one's seal had lasted so long because one of them had stayed behind, had volunteered to exist in the space between worlds forever, maintaining the connection that kept the devourer contained. A living sacrifice, not death, but something infinitely harder, eternal isolation in service of connection. Through the bond, she felt the exact moment when the others understood too, felt their horror, their immediate rejection of the idea. They'd just learned to tear down their walls, to embrace vulnerability and connection, and now one of them would have to give it all up to exist alone in the void forever. "I'll do it," Maya sent immediately, already preparing to separate her consciousness from the collective. This was my plan, my responsibility. I should be the one. No. Kale's presence in the bond blazed with sudden intensity, and before Maya could stop him, she felt him reaching for the anchor point of the seal. "Kale, don't. You said I had to prove myself through actions, not words." His mental voice was calm, resolved. "You said you wanted to see if I was capable of change. Well, here it is. My final answer to 3 years of asking the wrong questions." Maya tried to pull him back, but he was already moving, his consciousness flowing toward the center of the web, where the anchor point pulsed with hungry emptiness. "You can't do this," Maya sent desperately. "You don't understand what you're agreeing to. It's not death, Kale. It's worse. You'll exist between moments forever, aware but alone, holding this seal together for millennia, while the rest of us move on with our lives." "I know," Kale replied, and through the bond, she felt him pulling up every memory he had of her. The night he'd first seen her through the eyes of his dying wolf form, the moment she'd poured silver flame into his wounds without hesitation, the way she'd looked at him in the cave, starting to believe in connection again, despite every reason not to. "Maya, I've spent my entire life trying to control everything because I was terrified of chaos, terrified of becoming my father, terrified of the monster that lives inside every dire wolf." She felt him opening himself completely, letting her see the deepest parts of his soul. The boy who'd watched his father lose control, the prince who'd spent decades building walls so thick he'd forgotten what genuine emotion felt like, the king who'd tried to cage the one thing that could have saved him from himself. "But you showed me something I'd forgotten," Kale continued. "Control isn't strength. Vulnerability is. Being brave enough to let someone see all your darkness and trusting they won't run. That's what makes us more than monsters." "Kale, please." Maya could feel tears streaming down her face in the physical world, could feel the other 18 souls in the bond echoing her desperate plea. "Don't do this. We'll find another way." There is no other way. His presence in her mind was gentle now, tender, and honestly, I can't think of a better way to spend eternity than holding the web that keeps you safe, keeping the void at bay so you can live the life you deserve. He was at the anchor point now, his consciousness beginning to merge with the seal itself. Maya could feel him starting to separate from the collective, could sense the immense power required to maintain the prison from the inside. "I tried to cage you once," Kale sent, his mental voice already growing distant. Let me spend forever making sure nothing else ever does. Kale. Maya choked on the words she'd spent 3 years believing she'd never say to anyone again. I was starting to forgive you. Starting to believe we could. I know. Warmth flooded through the bond, the ghost of a smile in his thoughts. And Maya? That's enough. That's more than I deserved. The fact that you were willing to give me a chance after everything I did, that's the only redemption I needed. She felt him pulling more of himself into the anchor, felt the seal stabilizing as his consciousness took on the burden of holding 20 souls worth of connection in place across dimensions. Tell me something. Kale's presence was fading fast now, becoming part of the web itself. If we'd met differently, if I hadn't been such a coward, if I'd chosen trust instead of control from the beginning, do you think we could have been happy? Maya felt something break open in her chest, and she stopped fighting his sacrifice long enough to send him the truth. Yes, she answered. I think we could have been extraordinary. She felt his joy at those words, pure and uncomplicated, filling the bond with light. Then I'll hold on to that, Kale said. In the long darkness ahead, I'll remember this moment. I'll remember that Maya Karen, the silver flame, the woman I betrayed, thought we could have been extraordinary. Kale. And Maya. His voice was barely a whisper now, more memory than thought. Don't let my mistake make you afraid to trust again. Don't let what I did make you forget how to be vulnerable. Promise me you'll let yourself be loved by someone who deserves you. I promise. Maya sent, even though the words felt like swallowing broken glass. Good. One last pulse of warmth. One last ghost-like touch against her consciousness. Now go live the life I was too much of a coward to build with you. And don't you dare mourn me. Celebrate instead. Celebrate the fact that the manipulative bastard who tried to cage you learned something about sacrifice before the end. Then he was gone. Not dead. Maya could still sense him through the seal, could feel his consciousness woven into the very fabric of the prison they'd built. But separate now, existing in a state between life and void, holding the web together with the strength of his will and the weight of his redemption. The other 18 souls in the bond were silent, processing the magnitude of what Kale had done. Even Alpha Silvermoon, who'd hated the dire Wolf King just days ago, sent waves of respect and sorrow through the connection. He's stable, Maya sent, forcing herself to assess the seal with clinical detachment. The anchor is holding. The devourer is contained. But he's alone. Sarah's voice was thick with tears, locked in the void forever while we get to go home. Not alone, Elder Marcus corrected gently. Connected to all of us through the seal. He'll feel every moment of life we experience. Every joy, every triumph. He's given up his ability to live directly, but he'll experience life through the rest of us. It was true. Through the seal, Maya could feel Kale's consciousness touching the edges of her own, could sense him learning to navigate his new existence. He would be aware of everything they did, would feel their emotions like echoes, would exist in a strange state of connected isolation. Not quite alive, not quite alone, but something in between. We need to return, Maya sent to the group. The seal will hold now, but we need to get back to the physical world before our bodies deteriorate too much. The transition back was easier than the journey into the void had been. The seal guided them home. Kale's presence in the web, creating a path through the chaos. When Maya opened her eyes in the sacred grove, she found herself lying on the ground beside the altar, 19 other wolves slowly coming back to consciousness around her. The sky above was clearing, the unnatural darkness receding as reality stabilized. They'd won. The devourer was caged, the shadow walkers were dissipating, and the world was safe. But Maya felt hollow, like someone had reached into her chest and removed something vital. She sat up slowly and looked around the grove. Every wolf who'd been part of the bond was marked now, silver symbols etched into their skin like tattoos, glowing faintly with the power of their connection. The marks were beautiful and permanent, a reminder that they would be bound to each other for the rest of their lives. Maya touched the symbol on her own shoulder, right beside the birthmark that had started this entire journey. Through the seal, She felt Kale's consciousness stir in response to her touch, felt his awareness focusing on her from across dimensions. "I'm here," his voice whispered through the connection, faint but unmistakable. "I'll always be here, Maya, watching over you from the spaces between." She wanted to scream, to rage at the unfairness of it all. She'd spent 3 years running from connection, and the moment she'd finally opened herself to the possibility, the man who'd started to earn her forgiveness had sacrificed himself to keep her safe. But instead, she just sat there in the sacred grove, surrounded by 19 other wolves who'd become her family through shared vulnerability, and let herself feel the grief. "Thank you," she sent back to Kale, knowing he would feel the words through the seal. "Thank you for proving you were capable of choosing someone else over your own fear. Thank you for the sacrifice, and thank you for giving me back the ability to trust." She felt his warmth in response, distant but present, and knew that somehow, impossibly, they would both find a way to live with this new reality. Around her, the other wolves were helping each other stand, touching their new marks with wonder and processing the permanent bond they now shared. They would need time to adjust, to learn how to navigate life while being connected to 19 other souls. But they had time now. Kale had given them that. The world was saved, and the price had been paid, not in death, but in eternal vigilance, in a sacrifice that was somehow more profound than any ending could have been. Maya stood on shaking legs and looked up at the clearing sky, feeling Kale's presence in the seal like a ghost wrapped around her heart. "Live," his voice whispered one last time. "Live beautifully, Maya, for both of us." And despite the tears streaming down her face, despite the hollow ache in her chest, Maya smiled. "I will," she promised. "I will." Chapter 8, Silver Flame Unleashed. 3 days after Kale's sacrifice, Maya discovered that surviving the impossible came with consequences no one had warned her about. She stood alone on the cliffs, overlooking the northern territories, watching the sun rise over lands that were slowly healing from the Shadow Walker's devastation. The sky was clear now, reality stable, the devourer contained behind seals that would hold for millennia thanks to Kale's eternal vigilance. They'd won. The world was safe. So why did Maya feel like she was coming apart at the seams? Silver flame danced around her fingertips without her conscious command, responding to emotions she could barely name. Since returning from the void, her power had been different, stronger, wilder, more intuitive, like breaking Kale's manipulative bond, and then forging the seal with 19 other souls had fundamentally altered what she was capable of. "You're not just a silver flame healer anymore," Kale's voice whispered through their connection, still present despite the dimensions between them. "You're something new, something the first ones never anticipated." Maya closed her eyes and felt the truth of his words. Through the bond connecting her to the other 19 wolves, she could sense their life forces, like stars in her personal constellation. Could feel Sarah studying ancient texts in the Silvermoon archives, Alpha Silvermoon negotiating peace treaties with formerly hostile packs, Elder Marcus teaching young wolves about the importance of vulnerability and connection. But it went deeper than just sensing them. When she concentrated, Maya could touch their wounds, not just physical injuries, but emotional scars, psychological trauma, the jagged edges where pain had carved canyons through their souls. And she could heal all of it. She'd discovered the extent of her new abilities yesterday, when one of Kale's warriors, a wolf named Dane, who'd been part of the 20, had suffered a breakdown after returning home. The memories exposed during the bonding ritual had been too much, too fast, and he'd fractured under the weight of processing decades of suppressed trauma all at once. Maya had found him in the castle's training yard, shifted into wolf form, and howling with a grief that made her chest ache. Without thinking, she'd reached through their bond and poured silver flame directly into his consciousness. But instead of just dulling the pain or healing surface wounds, she'd done something else entirely. She'd gone into his memories and recontextualized them, shown him how to metabolize trauma into wisdom, rather than letting it fester into poison. She'd literally reached into his psyche and helped him rebuild the parts of himself that had been broken since childhood. When Dane had shifted back to human form, He looked at her with eyes that were clear for the first time in decades. "What did you do to me?" he'd asked, not with fear, but with wonder. "I don't know," Maya had admitted. "But you're not broken anymore. You're just yourself." Now, standing on the cliffs with silver flames spiraling around her like living light, Maya realized what she'd become. Not just a healer of bodies, but a healer of souls, capable of reaching into consciousness itself and mending the wounds that no medicine could touch. It was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. "You're afraid of your own power," Kale observed through their connection. "You're worried you'll hurt someone again, like what happened with Marcus." "Wouldn't you be?" Maya asked aloud, knowing he could hear her across dimensions. "I spent 3 years believing I was cursed, dangerous, that everything I touched turned to ash. Now I have power that makes my old abilities look like party tricks, and I'm supposed to just trust myself, not to destroy someone." "Yes," Kale replied simply, "because you're not the same person you were at 20. You've learned, grown, carried the weight of your mistakes, until they became wisdom, and Maya, his presence in the bond, grew warmer. You have 19 other souls connected to yours now. If you start to lose control, if your power starts to spiral, we'll anchor you. That's what the bond is for, mutual support, not just one-way sacrifice." Maya felt tears prick at her eyes, even from the void. Even while holding the seal together across dimensions, Kale was still trying to help her believe in herself. "I miss you," she whispered, the admission costing her more than facing the devourer had. "I hate that I miss you. I hate that just when I was starting to forgive you, starting to believe we could build something real, you went and became a martyr." "I'm not a martyr." Kale's mental voice carried hints of amusement. "Martyrs die for causes. I'm alive, just extremely inconveniently located. And Maya, I don't regret it. Not for a second. Knowing you're out there, safe and whole, and becoming something extraordinary, that's worth any price." Before Maya could respond, she felt another presence approaching through the bond. Sira, climbing the cliff path with the determined stride of someone on a mission. "Found you," Sarah said, when she reached the summit, only slightly out of breath. "The council is gathering. They want to discuss your new status." Maya raised an eyebrow. "My status?" "You're bonded to 20 wolves from different packs, including 2 alphas and several high-ranking officials. You have power that makes every other healer in existence look like amateurs, and you're the reason the world didn't end last week." Sarah smiled wryly. "People want to know what that makes you. What role you're supposed to play now that the crisis is over." Maya hadn't even considered that question. She'd been so focused on containing the devourer, on processing Kale's sacrifice, on learning to navigate her new abilities, that she hadn't thought about what came next. "What do they want me to be?" Maya asked. "Some want you as a leader. Some want you as a weapon they can deploy against future threats. Some want you as a symbol, proof that the exiled and rejected can become saviors." Sarah's expression grew serious. "But what matters is what you want, Maya. You've spent your whole life having your identity defined by other people. Maybe it's time you decided for yourself." The words hit something deep in Maya's chest. For 3 years, she'd been the exile, the cursed one, the woman too dangerous to trust. Before that, she'd been the healer, the alpha son's girlfriend, the wolf who never quite fit in. But who was Maya Karen, when she stripped away all the labels others had given her? Through the bond, she felt Kale's attention focusing on her, felt the other 18 souls also tuning in, curious about what she would choose. Maya looked out, over the territories stretching to the horizon, lands that had rejected her, hunted her, tried to destroy her, and she felt nothing. No rage, no bitterness, no desire for revenge or validation. Just a deep, bone-settling certainty about what needed to happen next. "I want to teach," Maya said finally. "I want to find every wolf who's been rejected, exiled, told they're too broken or too dangerous to deserve connection. I want to show them what I've learned, that our wounds don't make us weak. They make us capable of understanding pain in ways that whole people never can." Sarah's eyes widened. You want to create a sanctuary for the outcasts. More than a sanctuary, Maya corrected, silver flame beginning to swirl around her with growing intensity. A school, a place where wolves can learn to heal, not just bodies but souls, where vulnerability is taught as strength, where connection is valued over control. She turned to face Sarah fully. The devourer will test the seals again someday. Maybe not in our lifetimes, but eventually. And when it does, the world will need more than one silver flame healer holding the line. It will need an entire generation of wolves who understand that isolation is the enemy, that connection is what keeps the void at bay. Beautiful. Kale's voice was thick with emotion. You're going to change everything, Maya. I'm going to try, Maya replied, and I'm going to do it without asking permission from any council or pack leader. I'm done letting other people define what I'm capable of. The silver flame around her suddenly exploded outward in a pulse of pure healing energy. It swept across the territories like a wave, and through the bond, Maya felt it touching thousands of wolves, mending old injuries, soothing chronic pain, healing wounds that medicine had given up on years ago. But more than that, she felt it touching something deeper, felt it whispering to every isolated soul, every rejected wolf, every creature who'd been told they were too broken to deserve love. You are not alone. You are not cursed. Your wounds are not weakness. They are wisdom waiting to be unlocked. The pulse faded, leaving Maya breathing hard but exhilarated. Through the bond, she felt shock and wonder rippling through the 19 souls connected to her. What did you just do? Alpha Silvermoon's voice carried awe and a hint of fear. Sent an invitation, Maya replied, to everyone who needs what I'm offering. They'll come if they're ready, and if they're not, I'll wait. I've got time now. She looked at Sarah. Tell your council they can debate my status all they want, but I'm not asking for permission or approval. I'm claiming my purpose. Silver flame danced in her eyes. I am Maya Karen, the silver flame, the bridge between worlds, and I'm done running from what I am. Sarah stared at her for a long moment, then broke into a grin. They're going to lose their minds. Good, Maya said with a smile that held nothing but fierce determination. Let them. Change doesn't come from comfortable consensus. It comes from people brave enough to stand up and say this isn't working anymore, and I'm going to do something about it. Through the bond, she felt Kale's pride washing over her like warmth from a distant sun. That's my girl, he sent softly. Go show them what happens when you stop trying to cage silver flame and let it burn freely instead. Maya touched the mark on her shoulder, the symbol of her bond to 19 other souls, the permanent reminder that she would never be truly alone again. I will, she promised. I'll burn so bright, they'll have no choice but to see things differently. And high above the territories, the sun continued to rise, painting the sky in shades of gold and silver and promise. Chapter 9. The Price of Victory. The first cracks appeared exactly 1 week after Maya sent out her healing pulse. She was in the middle of negotiations with the Northern Council. 20 wolves from various packs gathered in Kale's throne room to debate the future of the territories, when pain unlike anything she'd ever experienced exploded through her skull. Maya gasped and doubled over, silver flame erupting from her hands in an uncontrolled burst. Through the bond connecting her to the other 19 souls, she felt their alarm, felt them reaching for her across the distances that separated them. But this wasn't something they could help with. Maya, Kale's voice cut through the agony, urgent and afraid in a way she'd never heard from him before. The seal. Something's wrong with the seal. She forced herself to look inward, to follow her connection to the web of light and power that kept the devourer contained. What she saw made her blood run cold. The seal was stable. Kale's sacrifice had ensured that, but maintaining it was consuming him faster than anyone had anticipated. She could see his consciousness being slowly eaten away by the effort of holding 20 souls worth of connection across dimensions, while simultaneously keeping the devourer at bay. He was dying. Not quickly, but inevitably, being worn down by the impossible weight of what he'd taken on. How long? Maya demanded, ignoring the council members who were asking if she was all right. Years, Kale replied, and she felt him trying to downplay the severity. Maybe decades if I'm careful. Maya, it's fine. It's not fine. Maya's mental voice cracked. You're being consumed by the seal. Why didn't you tell me this could happen? Because you would have tried to stop me, Kale said simply, and the world needed saving more than I needed to exist indefinitely. Through the bond, Maya felt the other 18 souls tuning into the conversation, felt their shock and horror as they realized what Kale's sacrifice truly meant. There has to be a way to stabilize it, Alpha Silvermoon sent, some way to share the burden. There is, Kale interrupted, but Maya's not going to like it. Maya already knew what he was going to say before the words formed in her mind. She could feel it through their connection, could sense the solution hovering just out of reach like a blade waiting to fall. The anchor needs more power, Kale explained. Right now, I'm maintaining the seal with just my own consciousness, but if Maya was to join me, if she was to split her awareness between the physical world and the void, we could sustain the prison indefinitely without either of us being consumed. No, Maya said immediately. Absolutely not. It wouldn't be like my situation, Kale continued, as if she hadn't spoken. You wouldn't be trapped in the void completely. You could still live your life, still build your school, still experience everything the physical world has to offer. You'd just be, partially elsewhere, one foot in reality, one in the space between worlds. Kale, you'd never be fully present, Maya, he said gently. Part of you would always be with me in the void, maintaining the seal. You'd feel every moment of life through a filter, experience everything from a slight distance. You'd be alive, but never completely. The other souls in the bond were silent, processing the weight of what Kale was describing. A half-life, existence divided between two states of being, never fully in one place or the other. And if I don't? Maya asked, though she already knew the answer. Then in 10 years, maybe 20, my consciousness will be completely consumed by the effort of maintaining the seal alone, Kale replied. The prison will still hold. The web of connection between the 20 of you will see to that. But I'll be gone. Not dead, just erased. Dissolved into the seal itself until there's nothing left of who I was. Maya felt tears streaming down her face. In the throne room, the council members had gone quiet, clearly sensing through her body language that something terrible was unfolding. So my choices are, watch you be slowly destroyed, or give up half my life to keep you conscious, Maya said bitterly. There's a third option. Sarah's voice cut in hesitantly. What if we all shared the burden, 20 souls each contributing a fraction of their awareness to maintain the seal? The cost would be minimal for each individual. Won't work, Elder Marcus interrupted. The anchor needs a continuous presence, not fragments. It requires someone capable of existing in multiple states simultaneously. The only people with that kind of power are silver flame healers, and Maya is the last one alive. Then we find another silver flame bloodline, Alpha Silvermoon suggested desperately. We search every pack, every territory. There isn't time, Kale said quietly. And even if you found one, it would take years to train them to the level Maya's already at. I'd be gone long before they were ready. Maya closed her eyes and felt the weight of another impossible choice settling onto her shoulders. Save Kale by splitting her existence between worlds, or let him be consumed and live her life fully present, but knowing she'd chosen her own completeness over his survival. It's not a fair choice, she sent to Kale, her mental voice breaking. No, he agreed, but life rarely is. And Maya, whatever you choose, I won't blame you. If you decide your school, your purpose, your ability to be fully present in your own life, matters more than keeping me conscious, I understand. I made my choice, knowing the cost. You're allowed to make yours too. The generosity of it, the absolute refusal to make her feel guilty, either way, somehow made the decision even harder. Maya opened her eyes and looked around the throne room, at Sarah, who'd become a true friend, despite their complicated history, at Alpha Silvermoon, who'd learned to value vulnerability over authority. At Dane and the other wolves who'd been part of the 20, all of them watching her with concern and understanding. She thought about her school, about the vision she'd had of teaching outcasts to transform their wounds into wisdom, thought about being there fully for every student who walked through her doors, every rejected wolf who needed to know they weren't alone. And she thought about Kale, existing in the void, consciousness slowly being worn away like stone underwater, knowing that he'd given everything to keep her safe, and receiving nothing but oblivion in return. If I do this, Maya sent carefully, if I split my awareness between worlds to maintain the seal with you, will you be there? Will I be able to talk to you? Exist with you in the void? Yes, Kale replied. You'd be partially in the physical world, and partially with me in the space between. We'd share the burden, share the isolation, share the centuries of watching over the seal together. So I wouldn't be alone, Maya said, and neither would you. No, Kale's mental voice carried warmth she could feel across dimensions. Neither of us would be alone ever again. Maya took a deep breath and made her choice. I need to address something, she said aloud to the council. A week ago, Kale Blackthorn sacrificed himself to anchor the seal containing the devourer. What I didn't realize until today is that maintaining that anchor is slowly consuming his consciousness. In 10 to 20 years, he'll be completely erased by the effort. She saw understanding dawn on several faces, saw them beginning to connect the dots. There's a way to stabilize the seal, Maya continued. If I join Kale in the void, if I split my awareness between this world and the space between, we can sustain the prison indefinitely, without either of us being destroyed. But you'd never be fully present, Sarah said quietly. Part of you would always be elsewhere. Yes, Maya acknowledged. I could still build my school, still teach, still be here for everyone who needs me, but I'd experience it all from a slight distance, like watching life through a veil. Never completely in the moment, never entirely whole. Alpha Silvermoon stood. No one would blame you for choosing to remain fully here. Kale made his choice, knowing the cost. And I'm making mine, Maya interrupted. Kale spent his entire life afraid of vulnerability, afraid of connection, choosing control over love. And then when it mattered most, he learned. He changed. He sacrificed everything to prove he understood what connection really meant. She smiled through her tears. How can I claim to teach about the importance of choosing connection over isolation if I'm not willing to make that choice myself? She felt Kale's shock rippling through the bond, felt his desperate need to tell her she didn't have to do this, warring with his overwhelming gratitude that she was choosing him anyway. Maya, you don't owe me this, he sent. I know, she replied. I'm not doing it out of obligation. I'm doing it because you were right. We could have been extraordinary. And maybe we still can be, even if it's not in the way either of us imagined. She turned back to the council. I'll need time to prepare, to set up the school's foundation so it can run partially without me. But yes, I'm going to join Kale in the void and split my existence between worlds. When? Elder Marcus asked, his ancient voice heavy with understanding. Maya felt the seal through her connection to Kale, felt how it strained under the weight of maintaining the prison with just his consciousness. Soon, she said. Before the year ends, I'll build what I can in the physical world, train others to carry on the work, and then I'll step between worlds to share the burden of keeping reality intact. Through the bond, she felt the 19 other souls processing her decision. Some sent support, some sent grief, all of them sent love and understanding that she was making an impossible choice with as much grace as anyone could. Thank you. Kale's voice was barely a whisper. Thank you for not letting me fade alone. Thank you for choosing connection even when it costs you everything. We're going to teach the world what real sacrifice looks like. Maya sent back. Not dramatic deaths or glorious endings, but quiet choices to stay connected even when isolation would be easier. We're going to show them that love isn't about grand gestures. It's about showing up, day after day, even when it's hard. Together, Kale agreed. Together, Maya confirmed. And somewhere in the void between worlds, the devourer watched and waited, wondering if these foolish creatures had finally learned the lesson it had been trying to teach them for millennia. That connection came at a price. That vulnerability meant pain. That choosing love meant choosing sacrifice. But what the devourer didn't understand, what it would never understand, was that the price was worth it. Chapter 10. New Beginning, New Threat. 6 months later, Maya Karen stood at the entrance of what had once been an abandoned fortress on the border between territories and marveled at what connection could build. The Sanctuary of the Silver Flame, that's what they were calling it now. A school, a refuge, a home for every wolf who'd been rejected, exiled, or told they were too broken to deserve belonging. The stone walls had been rebuilt by volunteers from a dozen different packs. The courtyard where shadow walkers once gathered now bloomed with gardens, tended by wolves learning to heal themselves through nurturing life. And at the center of it all stood Maya, existing in 2 places at once. Part of her was here, physical and present, watching the first class of students arrive with hope and fear warring in their eyes. But another part of her, the part she'd given to the void 3 months ago, existed in the space between worlds, hand in ethereal hand with Kale, maintaining the seal that kept the devourer contained. It was strange, living divided, like being 2 people with one consciousness, experiencing reality through a double exposure. When she looked at her students, she saw them with physical eyes, and also with the deeper sight that came from existing partially outside of time. She could see their wounds, their potential, the threads of connection that bound them to the greater web of life. "It's beautiful." Kale's voice came from both beside her in the void, and through the bond that connected them across dimensions. "What you've built here, what you're becoming." Maya smiled, the expression manifesting on both her physical face and her ethereal form in the void. "We built it," she corrected. "Every decision, every choice about curriculum and structure, I made them with you. This isn't my school, it's ours." Through their shared existence in the void, she felt Kale's love washing over her like warmth from a star. They'd learned to exist together in the space between worlds, had discovered that isolation wasn't so terrible when you had someone to share it with. While part of Maya lived and worked in the physical realm, another part spent eternity with Kale in the void, maintaining the seal, talking, sharing the burden of keeping reality intact. It wasn't the life either of them had imagined, but it was theirs, and it was real, and it was built on choices they'd made consciously, rather than walls they'd hidden behind unconsciously. "Welcome," Maya said aloud to the gathered students, 23 wolves ranging from teenagers to elders, all carrying wounds that traditional healing couldn't touch. "Welcome to the Sanctuary of the Silver Flame. I know many of you were told you'd never belong anywhere, that you were too damaged, too dangerous, too broken to deserve connection." She let Silver Flame dance around her fingertips, drawing gasps from several students. "I was told the same thing," Maya continued. 3 years ago, I was exiled from my pack for unleashing something I couldn't control. I spent those years believing I was cursed, that everything I touched turned to ash. I built walls so thick around my heart that I forgot what connection felt like. Through the void, she felt Kale's attention focusing on her, felt his pride and love supporting her from across dimensions. "But here's what I learned," Maya said. "Our wounds don't make us weak. They make us capable of understanding pain in ways that whole people never can. They give us empathy, perspective, the ability to reach others who are suffering because we know what that darkness feels like." She walked among the students, meeting each one's eyes in turn. "So yes, you're broken. Yes, you're wounded. Yes, you carry scars that will never fully fade. But that doesn't make you less, it makes you more. And here, in this place, we're going to learn how to transform those wounds into wisdom, that pain into power, that isolation into the kind of connection that can hold back the void itself." A young girl, maybe 17, with eyes that had seen too much too soon, raised her hand tentatively. "Is it true what they say? That you exist in 2 worlds at once? That you sacrificed half your life to keep the seal intact?" Maya nodded. "It's true. Part of me exists here with you, Another part exists in the void with Kale Blackthorn, the dire wolf king who anchored the seal. Together, we maintain the prison that keeps the devourer contained. Doesn't it hurt? Another student asked. Being split like that? Never being fully anywhere? Maya considered the question. Sometimes, she admitted. There are moments when I wish I could be completely present for something beautiful. A sunset, a student's breakthrough. The first time someone who's been isolated for years finally lets themselves be vulnerable. But then I remember that I'm never truly alone. That even in my divided state, I have Kale in the void, and I have the bond connecting me to 19 other souls, and I have all of you. She smiled. Connection isn't about being whole. It's about being honest about your brokenness, and choosing to stand together anyway. The students absorbed this, and Maya felt hope beginning to kindle in hearts that had been dark for too long. You're going to change everything, Kale sent through their connection. One broken wolf at a time. You're going to teach them that vulnerability is strength. We're going to change everything, Maya corrected. I couldn't do this without you. I know, Kale replied, and she felt his smile across dimensions. That's what makes it perfect. The rest of the day passed in a blur of introductions, curriculum overview, and the beginning of the work that would define the rest of Maya's divided existence. By the time the sun set over the sanctuary, Maya felt exhausted, but fulfilled in ways she'd never experienced before. She was making a difference. She was taking her pain and transforming it into something that could help others. She was living proof that being broken didn't mean being worthless. That night, while her students slept in the fortress's rebuilt dormitories, Maya walked to the highest tower and looked out over the territories. Through her divided existence, she could see reality from both perspectives, the physical beauty of moonlight on forests, and the ethereal web of connection that bound all living things together. Do you ever regret it? Kale asked softly through their shared consciousness in the void. Giving up half your existence to save me? Maya considered the question. Sometimes I mourn what we could have been if things were different, she admitted. If you hadn't tried to manipulate me, if I'd healed Marcus differently, if 1,000 small choices had gone another way. But regret? No, because this, what we have now, what we're building, it's real, it's honest. It's built on conscious choice rather than fear or manipulation. I love you, Kale sent, the words simple but carrying the weight of dimensions. I don't think I've said that clearly enough. Not I'm grateful or I'm sorry, or any of the complicated emotions I've been hiding behind. Just, I love you, Maya Karen. I love your strength and your wounds, and your absolute refusal to let the world define what you're capable of. Maya felt tears streaming down her physical face, while her ethereal form in the void glowed with silver flame. I love you too, she whispered. I love the man you became when you finally stopped hiding. I love that you chose sacrifice over control. I love that we get to exist together even if it's not in the way either of us imagined. Through their connection, she felt Kale's joy, pure and uncomplicated, flooding through both the void and the bond that connected her to the other 19 souls. But then something else rippled through the web of connection, something that made Maya's blood run cold. Do you feel that? She sent to Kale urgently. Yes, his mental voice had gone hard, protective. Something's testing the seal, probing for weaknesses. Maya focused her awareness on the prison they maintained together, and what she found made her heart sink. The devourer wasn't testing the seal from the inside. Something else was testing it from the outside. Something that knew exactly where to push, exactly which threads to pull to begin unraveling their carefully constructed prison. It's not possible, Maya sent. The first one's record said the devourer was unique. There's only one void entity. Was unique, Kale corrected grimly. But Maya, look, really look at what's probing the seal. She focused, and understanding crashed over her like ice water. It wasn't another devourer testing their prison. It was something worse, something that had learned by watching them contain the void, something that had been waiting, studying, preparing. Another consciousness, vast and hungry, but different from the devourer. Where the void entity was absence and entropy, This new presence was corruption and transformation. It didn't want to erase existence. It wanted to twist it, change it, make it into something unrecognizable. And it had been watching them, learning from their methods, waiting for the exact moment when they were too divided, too exhausted, too invested in their new existence, to respond quickly to a fresh threat. The devourer has a sibling, Maya breathed in horror. Or maybe not a sibling, maybe an opposite, something that feeds on connection the way the devourer feeds on isolation. A corruptor, Kale agreed, something that turns love into obsession, vulnerability into manipulation, connection into chains. Through the bond connecting her to the other 19 souls, Maya felt alarm rippling outward as they sensed the new threat, felt Alpha Silvermoon responding from his territory, felt Sarah dropping the book she'd been reading, felt all of them understanding simultaneously that their victory over the devourer had been incomplete. How long until it breaks through? Maya demanded. Unknown, Kale replied. It's testing different parts of the seal, looking for the weakest points. But Maya, it's smart. It's learned from watching us. It knows that the seal is built on connection, so it's trying to corrupt those connections from the outside. Maya felt cold dread settling into her bones. They'd built their prison on the foundation of 19 souls, choosing vulnerability, choosing trust, choosing connection over isolation. But what if that connection could be turned into something poisonous? What if the very bonds that made them strong could be twisted into weapons? We need to warn the others, Maya sent. We need to prepare. You need to grow your school faster, Kale interrupted. You need more silver flame healers, more wolves, who understand the balance between connection and isolation. Because if that thing breaks through, if it corrupts the bonds that hold reality together. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Maya understood. The devourer would consume existence and return it to void. But the corruptor would do something worse. It would twist life into a nightmare where connection became chains, where love became obsession, where everything beautiful about vulnerability became a weapon to destroy from within. Maya looked out over her sanctuary, at the 23 students sleeping peacefully, unaware that the world they'd fought so hard to save was already facing a new threat. This isn't over, she sent to the 19 souls connected to her through the bond. The devourer was just the beginning. Something else is coming, something that knows our strengths and will try to turn them into weaknesses. What do we do? Sarah's voice came through the connection, scared but determined. Maya felt silver flame building around both her physical form and her ethereal presence in the void, felt Kale's strength supporting her across dimensions, felt the weight of another impossible choice settling onto her divided existence. We do what we've always done, Maya replied. We face it together. We teach others to face it. And we prove that connection, real, honest, imperfect connection, is stronger than anything that tries to corrupt it. How long do we have? Alpha Silvermoon asked. Maya focused on the probing presence at their seal, felt its patient, methodical exploration of their defenses. Months, she said quietly. Maybe a year. It's not rushing, it's learning, preparing, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Then we have time to prepare too. Elder Marcus sent with his ancient wisdom. Time to train more healers, gather more wolves, build defenses against threats we don't even fully understand yet. The corruptor, Kale mused through their connection. If the devourer represents the death of connection, and the corruptor represents its corruption, then what does that make us? Maya smiled, despite the terror coiling in her gut. The ones who choose authentic connection anyway, she said aloud. The ones who refuse to let fear of corruption make us retreat into isolation. The ones brave enough to stay vulnerable even when vulnerability can be weaponized. Through the void, she felt Kale's agreement, his pride, his absolute certainty that whatever came next, they would face it the same way they'd faced everything, together, divided, impossible, and real. The true battle hasn't even begun yet, Kale sent. No, Maya agreed, looking out over territories that would soon face another threat they couldn't imagine. But we're not the scared, isolated wolves we were when this started. We've learned. We've grown. We've built something worth defending. And we'll defend it, Kale promised. Together, Maya confirmed. But even as she made the vow, she felt the corruptor's presence growing stronger at the edges of their seal, felt it learning, adapting, preparing to show them that everything they'd thought they understood about connection was about to be tested in ways they couldn't possibly anticipate. The age of the silver flame had only just begun, and the real war, the war for the soul of connection itself, was still to come.